Hey, what's up? This is Armory here. You don't need me to tell you how insanely popular sneakers are. Wearing them, collecting them, trading them, watching content about them. It's a market worth over $70 billion, and judging by the size of some of those communities, it's almost more popular than fashion itself. It's like wheels being more popular than cars. Sneakers are big, and that means sneaker reviews are big. If a shoe exists, you can bet somebody somewhere has talked about it, rated it, compared it to something else, all supposedly for our benefit, so we can make more enlightened and informed, correct decisions. But is access to all of this information actually useful? Let's talk about the rise of review culture. A while ago, I came across this article from Die Workwear about reviews. Specifically, it begins with a restaurant review. Stick with me, this will make sense in a minute. He describes a critic going to legendary New York steakhouse Peter Luger. It's been open 132 years, it's known for great steak in New York, and this guy trashes it. 0-star review. He leaves with the unshakable sense that I've been scammed. How could a professional reviewer visit such a highly regarded establishment with such a history behind it, eat the food there, i.e. consume the product, and come away with nothing good to say? The implication of a review like this is that the locals are under some kind of collective delusion about this place, and it takes the true professional to march in, pull back the curtain, and expose it for what it truly is. However, the article neither defends this review nor applauds the reviewer for their apparent bravery. We go on to read a response arguing that this person is a cultural outsider with a little appreciation for the true value or personal significance of eating at this place. What it represents to a New Yorker, how it cares for and represents part of its community, and its rather prickly attitude to tourists. All of those things are very difficult to quantify but massively shape our perception and experiences of things like Peter Luger. A career reviewer, though, aims by necessity to ignore a lot of those things in favor of the consumable parts of the product, the quantifiable things. Okay, so one guy had a disappointing steak. How does that apply to sneaker culture? Just as food critics talk about how well cooked or presented a dish is, sneaker reviewers talk in similar quantifiable terms, which is pretty understandable. You could say a sneaker is a 10 out of 10 if it's got super advanced midsole technology to make it comfortable all day, a great lacing system for securing your foot whilst making it easy to take on and off, and design details associated with rarity and value. All these sorts of things have their place. People want to know whether they're about to buy some horrendously uncomfortable shoe or a marvelous feat of sneaker engineering. But let's be honest with ourselves here. Are they the real reason we get excited about sneakers? Actually, I'm the sort of person that does get excited about sneaker engineering, but putting that to one side for a second, a shoe could be objectively the greatest thing ever, but if it has a Skechers logo on the side, you're probably not going to want it, because you don't want Skechers, you want Asics, New Balance, Birkenstock. And streetwear reviewers who want visibility on their content are going to cover those sorts of brands a lot more, even when there's nothing of substance left to talk about. But at the same time, there's a common narrative of stripping away the hype, forgetting about all of those cultural influences, and just looking at the physical form of the shoe. Are the Travis Scott shoes really worth it?
Putting aside that whole hype aspect about this shoe, I honestly think the colorway is very, very clean.
In my humble opinion, that is way too much. I mean, I get it, people are spending that, but for me, that's a lot of money.
Reviewing means doing an awkward dance of engaging with cultural moments and sneaker trends, but presenting the idea that we're only here for the quality of the leather, the interplay of design elements, the price to performance ratio.
Overall, the materials make this shoe super cool. It adds a lot of depth and a lot of interesting elements to the design of the shoe.
I can't think of an example of a reviewer spending time talking about why they chose to purchase a certain shoe, or their appreciation for a collaborator, or how they always loved basketball and so they have a particular fondness for J1s. It is pretty common though to see sneaker reviewers buying collab shoes with seemingly little interest in the collaborator, or at least playing down that interest in favor of talking about the consumable product.
I'm guessing, based off of this shoe, acronym is they're a brand built on chaos, I guess. This is a really chaotic shoe. This shoe has a lot going on.
Before we get into the shoes, we have to talk about Cortez the brand. Now honestly, I didn't know much about about the brand before. In fact, the first time I ever heard of them was while scrolling through TikTok.
The less we hear about that sort of personal interest, the experiences of others shaping why they like sneakers, the less we are trained to think about that for ourselves or value our own thoughts and feelings about stuff like that, in favor of these measurable constituent parts. I've struggled with this myself. By the time I reviewed the Nike Lab ACG 2-in-1 jacket, I already owned other objectively better things. I described some flaws in it or some areas where other later jackets improved, but I felt like I was being a bad reviewer for noting all those things and still liking it anyway. Because Nike Lab ACG represents my first experiences with technical fashion and the start of me sharing my interest in fashion online. Those are pretty important parts of who I am. I ended up using that video to talk about the nature of buying our grails and how we can prescribe too much value to things when our personal connection to consumable products takes over. But I think it's impossible to totally separate the product from that kind of cultural weight that it carries. And I think that turned out more honest and more interesting than had I just told you the objective features of the jacket and given it a rating out of 10. Now, you could argue that people don't want a sneaker review to go on a massive tangent about the reviewer's personal life, like when you're looking up a brownie recipe online and they all start off with several paragraphs about how they used to go to the zoo as a child. Yes, there are certainly times when I just want to look up how good is this thing, especially when it comes to something like a mobile phone or a graphics card. I just want to know that it's going to do the job that I'm buying it for, or work in the conditions that I want it to work in. However, when reviews are the only way we consume information about something, there is something crucial that we're losing there. They teach us about the nature of a product, yes, but not its cultural language. We don't get to learn the wider story or how to read those design elements and what they might mean, or the cultural landscape the thing was created in and how that affects the final product. It's all immeasurable but cool stuff. Reviews and features lack ability to communicate sneakers in a historical, cultural, design sense past basic facts about their creation, and they also don't really help us develop good taste. You don't come away more knowledgeable about sneakers, just more knowledgeable about that pair of sneakers. It's content which necessitates the consumption of 100 other pieces of content, because it doesn't teach you to criticize or analyze material for yourself. You'll notice how easy it is to describe product only in terms of their relationship to other products, rather than anything with any real significance. This is review culture at work, and it's something that I did literally this week in a TikTok when I was talking about sneakers. The frayed edges have a very high fashion edge to them, a little bit like a Rick Owens shoe. We talked about Baudrillard's ideas about simulacra in a previous video, and this is another example. We're defining consumable goods only by their relationship to other consumable goods. I could have described this shoe's intentional deconstruction as a reminder of the fragile nature of a mass-produced good like this, or an invitation to wear a product like this into the ground and really get the best use out of it. But instead, the only thing I could think was, oh, it's just like a Rick Owens shoe, wow. Weak. And again, the more content we see like this, which I have now inadvertently contributed to, the more we are taught this is the language of how we talk about sneakers, and the more reviews we need to watch to become fluent in that language. Who teaches us the language of sneaker reviews, or any reviews, is also worth thinking about. Traditionally, journalism has been gatekept behind qualifications and networking, so only a select few would really talk about these kinds of products and trends in publications. Content creation now, though, is far more democratized. In many ways, this is a good thing. I think it's really cool that more people than ever are empowered to do interesting creative stuff, share that with the world, and for amazing success stories to come out of that. All of that stuff is genuinely inspiring. This means a lot of people can make creating content their hobby. What a bad idea, am I right? I can tell you that takes a lot of time and development of a lot of different skills, from researching and writing to recording and editing. The hobby, what people actively spend their time working on, is the act of content creation. It is not, therefore, walking around all day having a variety of different experiences, nor is it necessarily developing an appreciation for different types of sneaker designs. The people putting a lot of effort into doing all that are probably not putting quite as much effort into making the content. Maybe they put out reviews sporadically, maybe they come out weeks or months after a shoe release, maybe they're not algorithmically optimized so not as many people see them. Even with me, I like hiking and outdoor stuff, I wear brands like Arc'teryx and Salomon to do that. There are absolutely people out there who wear that stuff in harsher conditions and more frequently than me. I'm just the one who grinded out making videos every single week about it and put a lot of effort into trying to make them entertaining. There's a certain irony of spending so much time making content about outdoor clothing that you don't go outdoors as much as you'd like. That's not lost on me. I guess we all need to find some terminally offline fashion friends to tell us what's actually worth buying. Related to the idea of content creators delivering us review content is the link that we place between value and visibility. A lot of people watch this video, so it must be pretty good, or there must be some degree of truth to it. Not many people watch this one though, so maybe there's something wrong with it, maybe they're not very good at reviewing stuff. Like everyone, I'm guilty of thinking stuff like that as well. And even if people say to me, oh, I thought your channel would have more subscribers, my first thought is that, wow, that's a really high compliment because they're comparing little old me with some really amazing, highly viewed content. And of course, those kinds of comments show just how common it is for people to think that truth and goodness is linked to how many people have seen something. This is not a new phenomenon, this is part of Debord's thinking in Society of the Spectacle, which is something that we've looked at in previous videos. He describes how visibility is a key way that commodities, in this case media, have their value inflated beyond their use value or their material value. When this was written prior to the age of social media, it more relates to how people will believe anything they see on TV, because everybody watches TV, right? It's funny how relevant those observations continue to be. This video's got 100,000 likes, so there must be some truth in it. It's natural for us to do that. We're social creatures. The idea of something being observed or validated by others is really powerful. In marketing, it's called social proof, and it's used absolutely everywhere, from #1 on TripAdvisor to overwhelmingly positive reviews to 9 out of 10 dentists recommend flossing. In the case of review content, those kinds of numbers aren't useless, but they tell us more about the nature of that person's ability to create content than it does the validity or the truth of the review. They can go hand in hand, of course. Many reviewers don't get to the top of their game without having some understanding of the products they're reviewing. But I'm sure you've come across plenty of examples where viral content doesn't have the same substance that more niche content does. For example, I like listening to Kevin talk about shoes because his background knowledge is really good and he tends to wear things a lot before talking about them. But it's the expertly shot and presented day one video review that scoops up all the views. One is better online content about sneakers, and one will help me better develop knowledge and understanding of sneakers, and insight into developing taste in sneakers. There's value in both of those things, of course, and it's worth being conscious that a view count isn't necessarily a truthometer. As an example of this, there is a famous review from Rose Anvil exposing Common Project as a cheap product by cutting them in half and explaining the supposed low quality of the shoe. Even doing this and neglecting to mention how culturally iconic Common Projects are and how much they inspired people's style and grew the popularity of luxury tennis shoes in the mid to late 2010s is an example of product reviews only discussing the measurable constituent parts. Even though some have argued this video misrepresents the shoe's construction and describes features as cheap or low quality when that isn't necessarily the case, the fact that this has millions of views makes it feel to us like this is the only content on Common Project worth watching.
It just kind of feels like a cheap shoe posing or pretending to be an expensive shoe.
Now it's the first thing you see when you look for Common Project, and it doesn't even show the shoe on someone's foot. And if this very detailed Reddit post is to be believed, it could well be giving people a false impression. Much of what we've covered so far kind of trends towards sneakers being described as these objects of consumption, like these little puzzles that we have to solve where we buy objectively the best thing based on all of the different criteria lining up, rather than what aligns best with our interests, experiences, or taste. Of course, this puzzle is essentially unsolvable because of the sheer volume of sneakers and sneaker content. It's hard to be satisfied with a shoe when there's the opportunity cost of the other 99 shoes that you're not going to buy that you also watched a 10-minute video about. This is called the paradox of choice, and it's also mentioned in the Die Workwear article. If I showed you 3 pairs of sneakers and said you can have one of these for free, I bet most of you would pretty confidently be able to pick the one that you like the most. But if I showed you 50 and gave you the same opportunity, you'd probably find it a lot harder to choose, and you'd probably feel pretty disheartened knowing that whichever one you pick, there's probably some other cool ones that you might have liked more that you missed out on. We see then a potential for sneaker review culture to encourage us to consume more reviews, because that's how we're taught to develop our product knowledge, even though that makes us more dissatisfied with what we miss out on, and watching all those reviews makes it harder to decide on the thing we want. They could even pressure us to buy more. What if the new sneaker has an upgraded gusseted tongue or solves the midsole problems of the previous release? Maybe you didn't even notice those midsole problems, but now you feel like you've got an inferior product, and there's something better out there that you should have bought instead. I'm certainly not anti-review or anti-reviewer. I do actually like making content about stuff, and I think it's an important tool in our arsenal of helping us to decide what we should buy. Where sneakers are concerned, this is particularly important when we have a specific use for them in mind. We want to know information like, are they supportive enough for running? Does the outsole suit soft terrain? Can I attach giant spurs to the back of them? But for the reasons I've talked about in this video, I don't think it should be the only way we talk about sneakers or products in general. How do we summarize all of that discussion though into something we can easily articulate? I'll return to that Dye Workwear article and leave you with a quote which maybe doesn't summarize everything we've talked about, but I feel like is quite poignant. Clothing is sterile without stories, community, and things that excite the heart as much as they do the mind. Most sneakers are mass-produced goods, they don't come with rich narratives attached, but I do think that the stories of why people like things are worth telling, and I'd love to see that introduced more in product review content. Maybe I do want that zoo story attached to the brownie recipe after all. And that is my review of reviews. Really hope you enjoyed this video, would love to hear what you think of it as well. Recently I've been super impressed with how thoughtful some of you have been engaging with some of these more complex topics that we've talked about, so would love to see that down in the comments. I'm going to be checking through them for sure. If you enjoyed the video, please do give it a like, it is massively appreciated, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one.